In the past, cultural preservation meant colonizers and others from the West documenting and collecting cultural artifacts, unilaterally writing the world's history books, building elaborate museums that recounted the stories of how and where civilization began. Thankfully, in recent years, there has been a vocal outcry, in large part by many of you, to rethink our priorities, our processes, methodologies for cultural preservation and conservation. Increasingly, there has been an emphasis on bringing multiple and varying perspectives to the table.
How do we make our history real for our future generations? And that means that right now we have to be engaged in saving what we have, what we've been given, and then finding ways to interest and encourage our young people to carry those cultural and historical traditions on.
I think that's where a lot of the energy and a lot of good new ideas will come from. And when the non-Asian, non-Pacific Islander community sees young people and everyone else getting so excited about the historic preservation efforts, it'll really kind of draw attention to it.
I hope that we're able to really help to change or move the agenda of what it means when we talk about historic cultural preservation, that it is much more inclusive.
Without the contributions of Asian Americans in our country would not look the way it looks. And it wouldn't have come as far as quickly without the contributions of our ancestors.
So what we need to do in terms of Asian Pacific American kind of preservation is to maybe rethink what we mean by history or historical. Does it have to be 100 years?
These sites are so important in understanding what has happened in the past so that future generations can appreciate what their ancestors have experienced.
Historically, it's material that just needs to be preserved, and stories that need to be told to the rest of America.
Trying to capture history, record history, create stories about just the experiences of being an Asian American. I never realized that it really is this fabric of storytelling that's kind of happening at a national level.
I feel that there's a lot of rich history that is untold, and I believe that it's our responsibility within our community to share these stories and bring them to surface rather than have others interpret how we must have lived.
Trying to pull out the stories from the remaining ancestors, the aunties, who might remember something.
No matter somebody's age, somebody's ethnicity, or where they're from, there's that common core of wanting to pay forward and being able to help preserve something now, people's stories, people's areas, and paying that forward to the next generation.
I really think there's kind of an aha moment or sort of a conversion experience that many people need to have, that this is not something that's you can push off to the back burner, but if we don't do what we need to do today, historic resources could be lost forever.
And I think from this moment, or kind of from this moment on, really feel that we have built community with one another. That we have these shared visions and shared goals, and that we can share best practices with each other, and really inspire each other to continue to do preservation.
We realize that we're not alone. We realize that the challenges are all the same.
It adds so much depth to have this other layer infused through historic preservation. And I mean, the energy that the Asian and Pacific Island communities bring to their historic preservation effort, I mean, I just think that it could really reshape and reinvigorate historic preservation nationally.
Traditional way of a historic preservation is kind of prohibiting, not really considering some of the grassroots, because that the APIA effort seems like taking the lead in redefining historic preservation.
People are needing to reevaluate what are museums, what is preservation, and what are you really preserving, and the stories and how the stories are told.
forcing a shift in thinking of historic preservation into more cultural preservation that has social equity built in.
Because we realize that it's about a legacy, and that these cultural sites, these traditions that we're hoping to preserve, that's all that they really are, legacy, making sure that they're not forgotten. And by involving the youth in each step, we are ensuring our future.
Whether it be the histories that we tell, the stories that we tell, whether it be the places that we save, whether it be the traditions, and we always need to preserve that connection between people and places.
The National Register of Historic Places, which is the official federal list of building sites, objects, structures that the federal government says we need to preserve for the heritage of the United States to be told. Only 3% of those properties are associated with communities of color. Only 3%, and that is African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, or Native American. Within that 3%, Asian and Pacific Islanders only represent 4% of the communities, of the properties listed on the National Register. 47 are listed for Pacific Islander, 94 are represented for Asian American, and that is out of 85,000 listings.
We want to empower people to see that preservation is preserving stories and experiences, and the value, and so Mount Vernon is not more important, than the Yamato colony, kind of thing, that each tells an important story that's part of the American experience.
We need to keep talking. We need to keep sharing.
The ancestors, my ancestors, are pulling me into the footprint of their history.
A crossroad lies before us. Do we reenact the history played out on the many immigrant communities that have made the U.S. their home, or do we emerge as proactive stewards to protect and defend, protect and conserve, protect and preserve what ties us back to who we are?
My hopes for future API historic preservation would be that we are integrated and are a bigger part of the mainstream efforts of historic preservation, that again, it's not just a subsection, but it gets integrated so much that people understand this is our history, our collective history.